My name is Bill Schultz, and I am the founder. This sounds a lot more formal than it really is, but I am the founder and the editor of the Hole in the Head Review. And next month we are celebrating our third year of existence. And that means 12 issues, 12 wonderful issues, and I see several people here who have been a part of Hole in the Head, which is wonderful. We are, if you have not had the Hole in the Head experience, you can simply go to www.holeintheheadreview.com and you can have the whole experience. I want to thank Don Larochelle and the Maine Jewish Museum for being so incredibly welcoming to us this evening. This space. This space. It is, they have been, when I first came up with this crazy idea of doing this quarterly, which we will do, and I reached out to my childhood friend, Gary Berenson, who is the rabbi here, and he responded within like 3 minutes and said, I don't run those things anymore. Yeah. And put me in touch with Don, who responded equally quickly and said how excited they would be to do this. So thank you so much for having us here. Jerry DeWaters is here, who is, these titles sound so official, but Jerry is the associate editor for art and photography. So thank you, Jerry. I let the staff off early today so they can so just a couple more things about Hole in the Head before we begin. I wrote kind of a statement of purpose 3 years ago when we started, and it was I honestly didn't think that it was going to last more than a couple of issues and it would fritter away. Thus the name Hole in the Head. Because I thought, the world needs another online literary arts magazine like it needs a hole in the head. But the statement of purpose was pretty simple. The first was to publish art, photography, and poetry that moved and excited us. Check. To respect the artist, photographer, and poet. Check. I think we hit that. This, if you're a poet and you deal with submittable at all, you know that you could live and die several lifetimes, and certain submissions will still be there on the submittable website because it takes places months, years to respond. So the third point was to respond to submissions within a reasonable time. Our goal has been to take no longer than 45 days to respond. And Duotrope, which is an online website that tracks these kinds of things, said that the quickest we've ever responded was 1 minute. That could have been Betsy's. Our mean average is 25.7 days, which in the world of submittable is like lightning fast. The median, I don't know I'm not a math person, but I know there's a difference. The median is 31 days, and our maximum has been 46 days, and so I think we've hit that. I think we've hit that goal pretty well. The next was to have fun. sometimes I don't know that I'm hitting that all the time. You know, about a month ago, I wrote to everybody and said, I don't know, should we keep doing this? Because a month ago, we were in the midst of final selections, and it was just like awful. And then I had a little footnote and said, do I do this with every issue? And Nancy Hill, who's one of our editors, wrote it back and said, yes, Bill, you do this every issue. So I guess we have fun. I don't, but I guess other people do. The next was to take chances. We had a video cover a couple issues ago, which was, I thought, just really fun. And it's one of the things that there's a lot that we can't do as an online journal, but there's a lot we can do. Our video cover with the famous earlobes flapping in the wind. We had Dave Mallet in May singing the Garden Song with his black lab coming in. And we're going to be doing more of that kind of thing. And the final point was to dazzle occasionally. And I hope that we have succeeded in that at times. We'll see. One other thing is my real job, my other job back in my other life, I did a lot with statistics, and so I ran a report today. We're viewed in 130 countries. 130 countries. Let me just read you the top 20. The United States, since we began, 169,151 page views. Second is Canada, third is United Kingdom, Australia, India, Netherlands, Germany, Ireland, Spain, Oman, France, Israel, Italy, South Korea, Nigeria, Colombia, New Zealand, Mexico, Philippines, Pakistan. Eat your heart out, American Poetry Review. And then, we get down and we've had visitors from Ukraine, possibly as a result of our Ukraine anthology, which we have 2 copies for sale out back. Nepal, Iraq, Russia, Romania, and at the end of our list is Tanzania, Namibia, Laos, Andorra, Cameroon, and Cambodia. For 187,296 page views, which I guess I never thought we would ever get anything like that. I also want to introduce Bill Burtis, who Bill and I have Jerry and I have only been friends for like 65 or so years. Bill and I have only been friends for like 50 years. So we're kind of just getting used to each other. But we used to talk about doing this kind of thing, and so we just did it. So anyway, that's it from me. Thank you all for being here. We have 2 wonderful readers this evening. We have a blank sign-up sheet for anybody who would like to read afterwards for our open mic. If you want to if you care to, you can go and write your name up there. And so tonight, our first reader is Linda Aldrich, who I've had an email correspondence with for the past couple of years, and tonight we were able to actually meet in person. Wow. Linda has published 3 collections of poetry: Foothold in 2008, March and Mad Women 2012, and Ballast in 2021. She served as Portland's Poet Laureate from 2018 to 21, where she hosted the Leaf of Voices reading series through the Portland Public Library. She also co-hosted with Marcia F. Brown the Local Buzz reading series in Cape Elizabeth for 7 years. She received an MFA from Vermont College and has been published in numerous journals and anthologies. She was awarded Hugh Noakes, thank you, Residency Fellowship and the Emily Dickinson Award from University's West Press for her poem, The Woman Without Arms. Before becoming a poet, Linda was the director of the Young Conservatory and a member of the repertory of the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, and later was associate professor of English and Humanities at Ames Community College in Colorado. More recently, Linda has taught at Keene State College, York County Community College, and Southern Maine Community College, and currently conducts poetry writing workshops around the state. She lives in Portland with husband David Miller and their exceptional dog, Linda.
Hi. Bill, should I still do 25 minutes or? Yeah, okay. Well, I'm really happy to be here. It's been a long time since I've done a live reading or even a Zoomed reading, actually. It's been a while, and I'm really happy to be back doing this. I'm really grateful to Bill and to the Hole in the Head Review for inviting me to read tonight. And I'm very thankful for the Maine Jewish Museum and Etzheim Synagogue for hosting this series. I think it's a great spot. It feels very, you can feel the energy and the heartfelt energy that has come into this place. There's no better place to read poetry, I think. I chose my first poem because I thought I would be able to see the violins that were on display here, the violins from the Holocaust. Some were played in the camps, and they were here until today, and they just left, which I didn't get to see, but I'll read the poem anyway. And actually, it's a piece that I started to write for a violinist, Liz Knowles, maybe in some sort of collaboration later on. She's a wonderful musician. And because of the violins were here and I knew she was coming, I thought I'd put them together and read this. The seldom rain. The seldom rain brims the edge of drying leaves and hesitates before it drops as beads that bounce, that break, but never saturate the pavement we have made. The world's grown hard. It desiccates. All that flies is bullet-shaped. My body that was once a lake is now in drought. You see the very least of me. My fears, my doubts have hollowed out. And all that I've held back from you, especially my love for you, the ways I haven't touched. The world's grown hard, it desiccates. All that flies is bullet-shaped. This empty gourd can still make sound. My feet can pound the sand. I fiddle forth this dance for you. I sing this song. I let my cheeks grow wet. This is a poem where I get to rant a little bit. Again, the circumstances of the world we are in. This was written in August 2020, and it's called Comet in the time of pandemic. Remember the Neowise comet? How many of you got to see it? Did any of you? Ah, well, yes, of course. I hope you're reading that. Comet in the time of pandemic. We find it under the cup of the Big Dipper, smudged fingerprint of light with a split and widening tail. Long-haired stars, the Greeks called them. This one last seen 6,800 years ago. Who on earth was looking up then to see this 3-mile diameter ball of ice and dust with enough water to fill 30 million Olympic-sized swimming pools before the Greeks built pools, or carried torches to Mount Olympus in pursuit of excellence? Imagine having that much faith in what we could do. And if this comet has eyes to see, does it look down on our blue planet and know what is endured here? God knows the night sky is a mighty thing with its constellated jewels and a proper moon that hides its face and grows ever more doleful. Our lives seen as tiny points of light in time and space are so small. We are not perceived by the naked eye quickly enough to catch us in our bills and junk mail, our groceries, shoes, glasses, orthotics, and carefully groomed dogs. Nothing is noted, factored in, registered by even the most powerful of interstellar telescopes, if indeed anyone is looking, and the most invisible are those of us who are hungry and have given up, are given up, sitting under tarps in the high heat, all husks and eyes, parched lips, unable to ask if there is more to it. Bugs in a jar we move around a bit, then expire faster than anything else, as intelligent as we think we are. And this poem means less the further you go from it, and the going from here is endless. Forever and ever we say about living happily at the end of our countless stories, and not an iota of evidence to support those ideals we claim to make ourselves a wee bit bigger and better before the Ursa Majors, our foraging, greedy bears, eat us and spit us out as just more frozen dust balls, casting about through time, dragging our sorry tails. We'll come back in a little closer. My grandmother. She was born in 1887, and her parents had come from Belfast, Ireland, and they moved to Canada. And then she lived in Vermont. Long distance. As if she held a tin can tied to a waxed string, my grandmother yelled louder into the phone the more distant I was from her. But perhaps it wasn't just geography, but how rare my calls were, and how she felt better raising her voice, pretending not to recognize me. If it had been too long a time, she'd just hang up. I knew I could call back later, and she'd blame her party line, especially Mrs. Meserve, the busybody who listened in and spread the news, or the red squirrels that were chewing her wires. We begin by talking about the garden, her raspberries, the tomatoes still ripening, the many new potatoes Grandpa had raked out that morning, and how she'd made a batch of donuts, and didn't she wish I was there to enjoy one with her? She loved me so much. Would she ever see me again before she died? Would I stay in that crazy city for the rest of my life, like her brother Will, who went out west when she was 14 and never came back after carrying his new bride across an icy river in some godforsaken place, caught pneumonia and died? 63062 in Newbury, Vermont, I'd say to the operator. Engraved in my mind, it comes to me randomly, like that annoying Girl Scout song about winding the old trails, rocky and long. But when it comes, I find a quiet spot and make a call. I think she listens. I say the things I wanted to say and never did, being so busy as I was with my admirable life. And I will read 3 poems from my book, Ballast. And I might have to take a little sip of water. My father died 5 years ago this coming January, so I thought I'd read a poem about both of my parents, actually. Cameo. If cassis shells were found on a beach in Madagascar by a boy with a woven basket, or pulled up in a net heavy with shells, the clatter of their falling together like china cups hitting, but not breaking. The sound so common. Villagers didn't think twice about the creatures living inside who died a quiet, secret death. And if the shells were sent to Italy to have their layered dorsa carved, the top a cream, the bottom caramel, into Greek goddesses who float with flower-filled hair, and were purchased by Victorian ladies on European tours to grace lacy collars, to be passed down from mother to daughter to mother again. How likely is it that on some future day my conflicted mother in our shabby mill town would find one at a yard sale for almost nothing and be made happy by it, be made to feel rich by it? My mother, who never went anywhere and then died, whose jewelry box, divided by 3 daughters, allowed the cameo to come into my pocket, where I rub it nervously whenever I go to the crumbling house of my father, who doesn't look up today because he doesn't hear my key in the lock, sitting calmly over his lunch soup, the kitchen filled with smoke, the forgotten pot on the stove framing his small head in orange flames. How likely is it I am here to see death's net thrown over him, to feel the growing pressure of letters carving into epitaph, to know he's become so light I could pick him up and hold him to my ear to hear the hollow sound of leaving. This poem I wrote in 2018, but I find it still relevant, unfortunately. And it was triggered by a headline in the newspaper that I didn't have time to read the article for because I was making my breakfast. And so I went off on my own imagination a little bit before I figured out what it was. This is called Bells, Bells, Portland, Maine, 2018. The slender baguette of my daily paper slides out of its plastic sleeve. Another soggy day, And the headline reads like a fairy tale. Who's stealing the bells? I wonder if this is the latest terrorist tactic in Europe, perhaps London or Rome, iconic symbols taken from cathedrals, or even the stone church I remember in my Paris neighborhood, the bell calling the hours and mass, the sound both startling and reassuring. And how I used to imagine Paris bells ringing when the Nazi occupation ended. Then I read the missing bells are not church bells, but ocean bells, buoy bells, navigational aids, each weighing 225 pounds, not easy things to steal, cast in high heat, forged to specific pitch. The larger the bell, the deeper the tone, the bronze, an amalgam of what endures, a tempered toughness and pure vessel of resonance that carries long past its strike action, vibrating out and out. Like her voice, I think, like Aretha. The Queen of Soul died this week. Last night we watched her sing for Pavarotti. All of herself given to her art and the release of each note, a rare effulgence, now gone. A map shows me where the bells were here, here, here along the coast, 9 in all, the empty buoys bobbing dangerously silent now, without tongues. And I imagine boats will soon go adrift in thick fog to dash on rocks. A sudden splitting of wood, the thrash and fist, the drowning of cries, the going down of a ship, our flagship. Lights sinking, blinking out. And did I say Aretha Franklin died this week? Nessun dorma, she sang. None shall sleep, none shall sleep. This poem has some lines that are crossed out. And so when I read the line that's crossed out, I'll do this with my finger so you'll know. Notes from the library lecture. How much does the songbird weigh? How much the song? The smallest hummingbird weighs less than a penny. Would we feel it light on our hand? Do we bother with pennies? A hummingbird takes 250 breaths a minute. Can the exhalation move a feather? 48 warblers weigh the 1 pound of coffee we drink a week to wake up. We wake up. Do we wake up? Our earth is the tiniest blue eye, sleepless and unblinking. 3 billion birds are missing. Finches, sparrows, blackbirds, wrens, they weigh on us. Glaciers weigh less than the water melting from them. Our tears are heavier than ice. As far as we know, we are all we know. No one is coming to save us. Okay, I think I have 4 more poems. These next 2 are they were inspired by colors. The first one by the color green, and the second one by the color yellow. That was the initial. I was going to do lots of colors, but I only did 3. So I have 2 of them here. This is called Absinthe. And there's a quote by Ernest Hemingway. Got tight on absinthe last night. Did knife tricks. Wormwood, fennel, wild marjoram, bitter tasting. But the ambitious sisters of Cuvée made good with it. Sold it as elixir, as classy apéritif. L'heure verte. And Paris smelled herbal from 5 to 6. Gauguin and Proust dancing the green fairy, the peridot glow, in the cafes of Montmartre. Manet, Verlaine, Rimbaud downing les vertes. Not the granny apple green of Americans, dumb as pie, but the color of vrais artistes, a chlorophyll vitrine window through which to absinthe yourself, be in absentia with Baudelaire. 120 proof enough you were almost like them, Degas, Picasso, Van Gogh, sitting across the room, rendering you, dripping you through their silver spoons and cubes of sugar, painting your plain and lumpy self, your weary wedge of eyes as you tossed the emerald dream. Gosh, I don't have any funny poems.
All right.
It's okay. This poem is about Van Gogh. About your impasto. It's a prose poem. About your impasto. The thick dough of it, the spinning stars flinging themselves. And those sunflowers, for instance, how you brought them close with a laying on of your palette knife. Made deep the pulsing life of them, your desire all halo and citron, pressing back what would seep into you, the swamp you said should not gather in a heart. And these lit torches, these candelabra you wrote about to your brother, and the pure white of the sun, the ochre flaming up into a field of wheat, all nodding their weighted heads to you, bending with seeds and berries, the heavy mortar of shortened lives. And how the wheat and the flowers blazed and burned out, how nothing could hold you here but your arm reaching for them, making a world beyond common bread and millstone, the purple hues of nightfall. And it was only yes you could say to the light, glorious yes. Your fingers swirling, swelling into all that would be yellow, yellow, yellow. And I will read for my last 2 poems. They actually go together. The poems that Bill Schultz published in Hole in the Head Review. They are called Utopia 1 and Utopia 2. And this is the end here. Okay. Utopia 1. Oh, I want to say this. I don't think I've ever told lots of you about this experience that I'm going to describe. And it's not in my bio. I have written about it in the past, but I think I should say a little bit. I lived in a spiritual commune. It was called an intentional community in the Southwest for 8 years. It was mostly Christian, but it had threads of other disciplines that wove through it. And, you know, people get all conflicted when they hear that. But I don't think you will, so I'm not going to worry about it. But for a long time, I was just really shy about bringing it forward. But I don't regret it one bit. I learned so much living there about people and human nature. So here we go. Utopia 1. Who I was started to disappear along the edges of myself at first, until I was a meld of common good. And after some years, unrecognizable to my past, I took walks alone in the foothills, but not really alone, because I could still hear them calling me back to the work there was so much of, the gardens, the kitchen, the many loaves, the voices well-intentioned, filled with purpose and multi-headed benevolence, all of them having settled into me and built nests, beautiful intricacies of feeling, flying in and out and landing there. And I couldn't close off. I mean, who would want to? Or form a word that wasn't, I realized later, realized by them, and made into so much eloquent flesh. Not a word of my own, because who was I, unless gathered into them with them in the name of 150 or more, and to think of what emanated from us, most especially from us. Our mission of radiance into the troubled world, sadly ignorant of how things were. And who knew if the love we felt was love, or just the tight weather of togetherness? The commitments we made to each other to keep from wanting too much, or making something of ourselves, or going out and finding a job somewhere, when the job we were doing right where we were was so much greater, we told ourselves and sang to ourselves, and fell into bed dead tired at night, dreaming to ourselves. But if I walked far enough into the hills, the tethered tenor of their voices barely sifted through the ponderosa, fragrant with summer's heat, showering yellow pollen on me and the path in front of me. And I found my two hands again, found wild calypso orchids, rubbed dirt from arrowheads pointing north, away, or south, doing the same with my thumbs. Utopia 2. A wide, sun-filled stream, lower Montana, or maybe the northern corner of Wyoming. Not sure where I stopped, and saw how smooth flowing and slow it was, how quiet and clear. No one around, no one on the road above. How golden the light inside the water. Dream of Eve, the morning of my first day. And so stripped and immersed myself and floated there, my hair suspended in a rippling circle around my head, my body carried as vessel of essential self, gentled, cooled, and emptied of worry there. Bright blown egg, weightless luminaria.
Well, words kind of failed me after that. Thank you, Linda, so much. And I want to introduce Maya Williams, who is here. She is the Portland Poet Laureate. Hello, Maya. Thank you for coming. Next, Richard Forester was born in the Bronx, New York, the son of German immigrants, and holds degrees in English literature from Fordham College and the University of Virginia. He is the author of 9 poetry collections: Sudden Harbor, 1992, Patterns of Descent, 1993, published by Orchises Press. Is that printed?
One or the other. Orchises or Orchises, he says.
It's either Orchises or Orchises, your choice. Trillium, 1998, Double Going, 2002, and The Burning of Troy, 2006, published by BOA Editions. Penetralia, 2011, and River Road, 2015, published by Texas Review Press. And Boy on a Doorstep, New and Selected Poems, Tiger Bark Press, 2019, which received the 2020 Poetry by the Sea Book Award. And With Little Light and Sometimes None at All, forthcoming from Literal Books next year. Richard has been the recipient of numerous other honors, including the Discovery, the Nation Award, Poetry Magazine's Best Hawken Prize, a Maine Arts Commission Fellowship, the Amy Lowell Poetry Traveling Scholarship, and 2 National Endowment for the Arts Poetry Fellowships, as well as 2 Maine Literary Awards for poetry. Since the late 1970s, his work has appeared widely in magazines and anthologies, including the Best American Poetry, Kenyon Review, Tri-Quarterly, the Gettysburg Review, Boulevard, the Southern Review, and Poetry. He has worked as a lexicographer, educational writer, typesetter, teacher, and editor of the literary magazines Chelsea and Chautauqua Literary Journal. A Mainer since 1986, he currently lives with his partner in a former Nazarene church in Elliott. Richard.
My legs fell asleep. Thank you all for coming out this evening, friends, people I know, and lovers of poetry. Thank you. It's an honor to be here in this wonderful space, surrounded by all of these names. And thank you, Bill, for Hole in the Head Review, for this invitation. And thank you, Linda, for that magisterial reading. I'd like to start just by saying, let's be mindful of all of these names here, and also the 11 victims of the Tree of Life synagogue shootings that happened on this day in 2018 in Pittsburgh. Just one kind of violence that we live with all the time. And, I have 9 poems. And I'll start with this because it is set in October. You can find it. Bucolic with thistles. It seemed unnaturally late in October for such wind-whipped plains. Goldfinches at the roadside, still molten in their breeding plumage, the males buttery and black against cloud-swept gray and prickling air. Where I'd parked to wait out a squall, I was close enough to see their tongues at work, assiduously prying at thistles that spiked the abandoned field. A waste of effort, I thought, nothing but tears where wheat had never been. Just stabs of icy rain and those summery hot coals of yearning for whatever might be teased from deep within the thorns. But I sat there, even after the idling engine stuttered me back to awareness the storm had eased. I'd no schedule to keep, no one waiting. The road stretched to every place I'd been hell-bent driving from. And yet, how relentless desire can be. The need to find and want some pathway to unwanting, to prize a stubborn seed of transcendence out from the fibrous core of one's own being. In that quiet, I could hear the finches, each chittering an alien gospel of a kingdom come. A dissonance rising on tiny pyroclastic waves into one atonal choir. 100 or more feathered candles flamed atop those spiny heads. Such raucous burning. What did I sense then, if not the barb of what I thought was happiness? In ancient Greece, the women of Athens celebrated the death and rebirth of the demigod Adonis, one of those youths who get killed because one god or goddess is jealous of. and in the case of Adonis, it was Aphrodite, and Adonis was killed by a boar. Probably Artemis was jealous this time around, but many myths. And what the Athenian women did, probably in the spring, some scholars say it was in the middle of the summer, was take broken terracotta shards and plant seeds in them, let them sprout, and then put them up on the rooftops where they would quickly sprout and die. Then they take the shards and in processions mourn the death of Adonis, who in myth comes back each spring as an anemone. My Adonis in the poem is rather contemporary. A pot of crocuses. The weathered crocus pot, which I coddle each winter under salt marsh hay, again commands its center stage in my kitchen window. In terraced beds, the corms poke through the soil like randy waking gods, their pale foul eyes swelling in the sun. All morning I reveled in the comfort of ancient ritual, till my neighbor's scab-kneed boy on Easter break began to trundle up and down the street on his skateboard, trying to gain the necessary speed that could spring-load him into air. As if in that moment he would escape once and for all the tedious maze of his adolescence and return, perfect and unbloodied, to an earth remade invincible with flowers. So I watched in secret and found myself urging him on, but soon he slouched off with raw, abraded palms toward home, and I felt I needed to call him back, my not quite budding Adonis, but could see on the asphalt beneath my window the small red stains from his hands. And I wanted to say, here, take these crocuses to your mother, so she might forgive the scarring a woman has to endure to see a boy safely to manhood. Instead, I stood there, wavering, with that crowded pot of spikes in my hands, and knew if I had summoned him, it wouldn't have been for any promise of beauty I had to offer, nor any incorruptible idea of it, nor even the cherished terracotta I've buried and retrieved these 15 years. For how could I have looked him in the eyes, not knowing which of these must end up broken first? Several years ago, I went to the Associated Writing Programs Conference in New Orleans, and got in a cab to go into the inner city. I'm sitting in the back seat, and I noticed the dashboard was like a religious shrine. And so I sat, and this more or less is what happened. There's an epigraph in Italian from Dante's Inferno. I won't try to read the Italian, but it says when Dante sees the souls of the damned seemingly in a hurry to cross the river into Hades, he wants to ask Virgil, why are they in such a hurry? But he knows to hold his tongue. The traffic between. Like a priest in the shadowed confidence of his confessional, the cabbie eased one shoulder back against the plexiglass divide and urged the question through. Have you accepted Jesus as your personal savior? The man was too sincere for me to laugh out loud. Still, I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the white noise that had been drawling from his radio all along, a Thorazine haze direct from Jesus Inc. Can't say I have, I almost said, but didn't want to condemn myself to his mercy for 33 blocks of midtown traffic. For a while, his eyes seemed to linger in the rear view, where he'd strung a crucifix on a chain. It swayed erratically, a pendulum jarred from its course, over a small gilt frame with snapshots of his wife and child. Beside it, a plastic pair of praying hands glued firm was wreathed at the base with a strand of worry beads. Is there hope, I thought, and turned my head to the motley stir of shop fronts snailing past. Soon I was lining up my old defensive arguments like flintlock muskets in humid weather. I wanted to tell him that long ago I knelt on green slopes charged with prayer's transforming lights, that I believed I could glimpse a face behind the scrim of each leaf I peeled from the tablet of days on my wall. I wanted to tell him of my sadness at waking finally to the treadle sounds of doctrines being honed into accents. How could I convince him that this is how death first entered the world, through certain faith and obedience? That the words of preachers flow down through history like unappeasable magma, that women can fester on the fullness of life and the souls of children starve even faster than flesh. This is the body of facts that faith must swallow whole. And what of Father Pelletier, who tongued me in the sacristy before saying Mass? This I would declare and more in one extravagant elegy, in salvos more offensive than evasive, and yet, when my eyes drifted back to engage the cabbies, I knew he was thinking, but what's all that got to do with Jesus? Is he any less because of the sins of hypocrites? And when at last we approached the destination, he broke the silence matter-of-factly. When the rapture comes, you know, you'll be left in the back seat without a driver. Then where will you be? I summoned words as best I could and wore a mock victorious smile. Right here, I guess, right here. Then fumbled with the fare and struggled out. Humor me with a little bit of show and tell, and I'm going to read Egon Schiele's Cell. Egon Schiele, the Austrian painter, and this is one when he was in prison on charges of pornography. And he did about 9 or 10 of these, and that's the cell he was in. And the, if I can find it here, what's written on the upper right corner of it is, Die eine Orange war das einzige Licht. The one orange was the only light. And the piece is dated April 19th, 1912. A blanket rucked with troubled sleep, the splayed shell of it coppering a fiery pearl. The gift of a single orange, which he claimed was the only light, though sometimes I want to imagine his lover Wally's spread thighs, or the rugged hull of her body on blue-black waves. bearing the treasured cargo from a tropic grove. The scent so focused in my mind it overwhelms the chamber pot, a bucket rendered in 4 deft arcs, squatting almost unnoticed beside the pallor of the bolted door. His folded jacket, a wash of earth-hard browns, his only pillow. He dreamt, he writhed, the orange blazed within the lime-washed walls where he spent weeks at the mattress edge, as on a precipice with charges pending. When did that light finally gloom with mold, or self-pity's hunger sink its nails till the soft flesh bled? The judge released him to the future irony of a conscripted life and early death from Spanish influenza. Now he is nowhere, yet everywhere encrypted in that empty cell. My embering beacon for nights I lie awake and find myself nestled on that bed. Appropriate to move, I think, from there to a poem called Claustrophobia. And that's a condition I suffer from. In fact, just thinking about it, my breath shortens. This references a time in New York City. I lived in Westchester County and would commute down into Manhattan. In the mid-'70s, late '70s, when New York City was on the verge of bankruptcy. I think it was Abe Bean's administration. Excuse me. Oh, thank you for the gin. And at the time, what's now Metro North was the New York Central Railroad. And like the city, it was on the verge of bankruptcy. The cars leaked, the engines would break down. And you'll see what I experienced on one of those trips. Claustrophobia. The crush of it. Not just the body swaddled in the sweat of fear's embrace, but the thought confined and bursting within its battered valise, buckled and strapped for a trip to nowhere but a smaller place, inside a cell where every pulsing neuron pounds against the tightening vice of silence. So when you crawled under the house today, to unearth boxes stored with the season's ornaments, I stood trembling at the sink upstairs with thoughts of a past I'd misered away like ingots in a vault. How can I explain what surges through me, except to say some memories are airless tombs? In a dilapidated '70s gray New York Central smoker, I once sat beside a double-paned window whose seal had broken. A yard's width of water sloshed to and fro between those panes like an aquarium, but compressed. Upper Manhattan's blind, abandoned tenements lurched and sped, slowed to a stop, then lurched again, till gone through dark, I arrived at a loveless station. The miracle of terror is how it feeds on a logic of incongruity. A mosquito had spawned inside that stagnant space. Just one, pale-winged, tapping the inner surface at the highest edge of its world. So bloodless, then suddenly inexplicable and abstract. God, under such weight, my breath shortened. As here, looking up from the spigot stream, the colander brimming with its green absurdities of Brussels sprouts, I thought I glimpsed again that doomed insect probing blankly at your winter-shuttered kitchen window, and felt once more immured in that bilge-filled railway car among the bankrupt city's moguls as they ferried between lives more radiant than I'd ever known. That's how you caught me, trapped in reflection. That's when you said, "Look what I found," forgotten, and held out some bright, insignificant thing. And turning, I opened to you for the first time. It's for Douglas. And another for Douglas. Just over 2.5 years ago, he suffered an accident, as you'll hear in the poem, and the X-ray of his hand shows the damage, which you'll hear about in the poem. But this was the inspiration for the poem. X-ray. Not pentimento exactly, how the surface is scraped away, but the flesh delved as if dissolved and ghosted, letting the invisible loom through depths the skin embodies. One finger bone gone, 2 others shattered into faint clusters of distant nebulae. See how I hold that film in my mind to another light, and try to make of trauma something mysterious, beyond reach of the naked eye. But then I undress the awful wounds, make note of sutures, seepages of blood, any least sign of infection before wrapping it all again in layers of gauze, and can't repress the shadow of the shock you felt, a future lopped from its past. Even now, weeks after, I wake recoiling from the thought of you recoiling from the snowblower's blade, and a phantom pain shudders my nerves, sizzles to each extremity. So many cataclysms of concern. These radiant bursts unmask the brokenness that resists diagnosis. Wounded and weak, a galaxy apart, I inhabit my own occluded dark, which love must plummet through unseen. 3 more. Another show and tell. This is a very new poem. In August, I was going to the craft show up by the museum, the other museum, and I parked the car and I was walking up Free Street and I encountered this on the sidewalk. Can you see? And it immediately reminded me of this. That's Archaeopteryx, the fossil, 150 million years old. Some things don't change. It's just, it was uncanny. And I went home and I started this on my way to the fine craft show, Portland, Maine. Critics everywhere. Brittle as a child's balsa toy, abandoned when it fell to the red brick walk. This corpse of what? A pigeon, crow, that weeks of drought and August sun unfleshed, here on Free Street, untrodden, ignored, unswept by wind or lazy merchants, is perfectly displayed in the blunt reality of decay, as if it were Archaeopteryx before the slurry of time fixed it to a matrix of stone. How delicate the neck's beaded braid, the skull's shallow well, where an eye floated with awareness from its ledge over the city. The breastbone's splintery twig still woven to a flap of skin like a nest from which its brood has flown. The matted wings, ruined underfeathers, gilded in this light like an emblem of empires gone, arch downward in a gesture of ascent. Tibia, tarsus, the leathery orange toes mime a desperate high-step run, as if the bird had been racing to get somewhere, to propel a weighty stillness into flight. Okay. I can be be 73 on Saturday, and you are
I will be 74.
74. And at our age, you know,
I know. I had to keep my hand down.
yeah, this starts to happen. So this is called Ode to My Left Hand. I'm left-handed. Today I noticed your tremor at the margin of my book when I read what D.H. Lawrence has to say about building a ship for the voyage of oblivion. And I thought, who am I to urge us on at this late stage, to navigate without caring where we've been, or to set out knowing every crafted hull must sink? Submissive slave, I've watched you raise martinis to my lips, strike a match to flood my lungs with self-delusion, tease me or another to the edge, then push me on the brink. Though I laugh at your seismic clatter with a teacup on a saucer, I cannot fault you now that each day alters the map of who you are. New mottlings on a sea of inelastic skin, more cracks and runnels along blue arroyos. Still, you caress, cradle, scour, run a razor daily across my cheek, peel tangerines and zest the air I breathe off your fingertips. Or greet a friend and with a gesture like a blossom's gentle trembling, bring poignancy to departure. Dear one, heaven has always been at hand. Take up your pen, it is the tiller. And the last one. Ever since my teen years, I've been in love with the music of Gustav Mahler. And so much so that I acquired the definitive biography, that's 4 volumes, this wide on this shelf, that was written by Henry Louis de la Grange over a course of decades. And when he finished the last volume, started going back to revise the first one because of all the new scholarly research. It's exhaustive and sometimes exhausting to read. But what I love about it is that in the appendices, he has thorough, and I don't read music, but he has thorough discussion of how the symphonies and the other works are put together, and then all the critical analyses, critiques that have been done over the decades. So in this poem, it's short, it's all one sentence. There are 4 quotes, and I'll go like that. So it's that I picked up from the critical analysis. Rondo Finale, Symphony No. 7, after reading Henry Louis de la Grange. Perhaps it is radiant dawn I'm meant to hear, and not some apotheosis of self-destruction with its disordered accumulation of timpani and bells that my iPod's earbuds now blossom with, flooding the late light of my living room where I sit over Spaten beers, Mahler's favorite, companionably drinking, just the 2 of us, I imagine, until the coda announces the coming end to the cacophony of our squealing barroom laughter over some bawdy joke, our boozed-up voices morphed into trumpets and drums, thundering a defiant joy above the world's tumultuous troubles. Suspended and brought into question here, rocketing toward a silence lavish with chaotic light. This vertiginous complexity pouring forth from the brain of a man I'm kissing full on the lips inside this raucous space, which I've cranked up to a near deafening blast of decibels to lift me on its blaze. Thank you.
courtesy of Hole in the Head Review, and it's wonderful that you both have birthdays. These, as a small token. It's rare that the birthday celebrants give us a gift, which you have each given us this evening. I may quit writing after this evening. There are books in the back, and I'm sure Richard and Linda would be very happy to sign them for you. There is a cigar box with a little sign that says donations on it, which would all go to the museum for opening up for us this evening. We're going to do this again in another 3 months, so stay tuned. We'll see. I can't imagine following this in any better fashion. However, we'll try. We try to dazzle. And we dazzled tonight. So thank you all for coming. And again, the book's up back, and there's also 2 remaining copies of the Ukraine anthology that Hole in the Head did in conjunction with our friends at 9 Mile Magazine. There's some wonderful work in there, and they're $10. And Eva Getz, who is a wonderful painter in Portland, has some work in there. So anyway, thank you all for being here tonight. It was really
It was wonderful. Thank you.